Be great about this. It's like it was the same with Mark, to just see how you
or not.
But y'all got other tricks y'all can pull to get out of contract.
On my brain.
What might have transpired when Joe Budden and Melyssa Ford left each other's world is still being revealed. Accordingly, Melyssa Ford has not been on the podcast since August 21st, which is August 21st, 2025. Since then, a lot of speculation has been made by both me and the fan bases of the various podcast subsets on websites like Reddit and Twitter. Many others are curious, so I'm sort of taking the lead in attempting to determine what precisely transpired. I've looked into a few hypotheses, particularly the lawsuit hypothesis, which holds that she left because Joe Budden is being sued for his naked sleepwalking that December night, and the theory that she and Flip got into a fight. Joe Budden decided to ride alongside Flip. However, in light of recent remarks, about 3 remarks have been made. One of these was Flip's remark, "Oh my brain," during their discussion of how people could terminate their contracts. Additionally, they discussed how women can break their contract.
Got other tricks y'all can pull to get out of contracts.
Don't we all?
No, we don't.
We don't have the same tricks?
No,
not at all.
on my brain.
Additionally, in case you forgot, Melyssa Ford had a severe brain injury in a somewhat bizarre accident years ago when her truck repeatedly flipped over, and I recall being astonished when I watched that video. I didn't realize this was very horrible until years later when I finally saw the video. Thus, Flip's action was startling. I know Flip's mentality, so sometimes the first thing he sees is the first thing he says. Perhaps he was just referring to something else. In my opinion, he may have easily been referring to Melyssa Ford. Additionally, during an interview with Quishy, they chose to blur out Melyssa Ford's name. Yes, exactly. Now that Melyssa Ford is mentioned, they are bleeping it out. Recall that they once did that with Mal and Rory. They used to either bleep their name anytime they were mentioned or avoid bringing them up altogether. Many people are now curious as to whether this is subject to any kind of NDA. Don't bring her up, you know? She may have said cease, as in please don't discuss the situation until it's resolved. We must thus return to those 2 instances. Could Melyssa Ford have gotten out of her contract by claiming that her prior brain damage simply left her mentally unprepared to work? It became extremely risky and difficult for Melyssa Ford and the other podcast participants towards the end of the show. It was quite disorganized.
So you could quit this job.
You could do what you want to if your contract reflects that.
Sit tight. Yeah, because y'all keep
She was behaving in a diva manner. However, she wasn't the only one who was in error. Perhaps she made the correct decision by not returning, and other show participants were mistaken. Joe was playing something like an introduction and discussing people obtaining their own drops when Flip said, "I'm going to get my own drop." This was another fascinating exchange. Joe then said, "No, we need to get you a drop right now."
drop.
I need one.
And we're going to get Flip a drop. I mean, now that...
Oh, you look nice.
Thank you.
Now that one.
I can't say it, but...
What is that? The reason they don't have to do the Ford and Flip, in my opinion, is that Melyssa Ford is no longer on the show. One of the amusing plot points of Melyssa Ford's tenure on the show was her outbursts about other people getting drops when she didn't. Therefore, that might have been a delusion. Regarding Melyssa Ford's activities, she has appeared on a few podcasts, particularly Off the Record.
Very much err on the side of caution. And erring on the side of caution means being very quiet. It's better for people to wonder what the hell you're thinking than for them to hear and know what you're thinking and you sound like an idiot.
In contrast to what the Joe Budden podcast co-host would say, she was discussing in that episode how she was, a part of the industry and making statements like they sexualized her and that she didn't really want to get along with the artists on set. Every time she said it, it was almost as if they were hinting that it wasn't always the case.
Figure out how to navigate those treacherous waters. And the way that I figured out how to navigate them was I aligned myself with with the people in power. The artists didn't have the power. So I aligned myself with director, producer.
Yeah.
You know?
They talk about.
And so I kind of made myself untouchable.
The remainder of the cast appeared to be in that headgear. She will also discuss perimenopause on a future episode of a health-based podcast.
And we'll just toss you aside for like the newest ingenue. And that's fine. You should absolutely do that. You know what I'm saying? I don't blame you for that. I'm still hot, but my worth is no longer ensconced in, in looking for male approval and validation.
It was much more, awesome in that episode. It was much more orientated on health. She simply appears to be happy overall now that she has stopped listening to the Joe Budden program. I think she is currently enjoying her honeymoon period while she is away from the show, but I do wonder how long it will take her to realize that she needs to find a way to remain visible, as she was essentially forgotten and not making any waves in the industry before the Joe Budden podcast. She also, I think, interviewed a director at another Manhattan private event or show.
How are you? I'm Melyssa Savannah Ford, and we are here in New York City at the ABFF pop-up. I am very excited about interviewing the gentleman to my left, Malcolm D. Lee, one of the most iconic storytellers and filmmakers of our generation.
As you can see, Melyssa Ford is taking a different turn and projecting a more respectable image. Additionally, I'm curious to see what her podcast's future holds. That is among the most perplexing aspects of the entire story. She quit performing in Hot and Brided, but she continued to perform in other programs. That seems to me to be making a concerted effort to avoid talking about the Joe Budden podcast, because, in my opinion, one of the main questions that people would have if she were to go on Hot and Bothered is, what happened to your time on the Joe Budden podcast? People will be asking why you haven't mentioned the show in that comment part, because Hot and Bothered began while she was on it. Her tenure on the Joe Budden podcast is comparable to the legacy of Hot and Bothered. Ian Schwartzman assisted her in producing that particular show. As you are aware, she used to invite guests from the Joe Budden podcast to that show. That was a point of disagreement. And I began to think back on all of the fascinating exchanges between Joe Budden and Melyssa Ford. As an example, I recall when she introduced Melodies. Do you recall Melodies? She eventually had to stop since it seemed like Joe Budden was telling her that her stealing his Sleeper IP was an infringement. That was her Sleeper portion. I brought that up because I believe we forget a lot of fascinating details about Melyssa Ford's tenure on the show. One of them is that Melyssa Ford chose not to accept a salary when she originally appeared on the show. Wow, that's interesting, was my reaction. In the first few episodes, she was not paid while she was there, and it might be an indication that Joe should never engage in an agreement like that again and pay everyone in full, since I believe she would use that to secure a bigger role on the show. For this reason, I believe Melyssa Ford really changed who she was when she initially appeared on the show when she got there. She likely believed she was doing this for free. I'm going to be myself, but you guys will be able to profit from me. I'm going to be the urban podcast equivalent of Barbara Walters. Additionally, she never really felt comfortable in that role. Regarding how this scenario is handled going forward, I can't help but believe that the podcast enjoys making references to it and won't stop. So I will be observing. I will be providing coverage. I refuse to believe that Melyssa Ford is unimportant to us. Many individuals think, oh, we moved on. We're not going anywhere. This scenario will continue to arise with each passive-aggressive remark. And now that Mona is on the program, you're noticing a lot of similarities, so I'm going to be right here to cover it. Even though things have changed, Mona and Flip do not get along. Despite having autonomy and the ability to speak up for herself, Mona feels silenced. It remains to be seen how things develop a few years into her tenure on the Joe Budden show, which I believe must figure out how to make this Mona thing work. Because if this doesn't work out either, another instance of a female co-host on the Joe Budden podcast finding it difficult to blend in is inevitable. A lot is going on. I've decided to focus more on creating podcasts for Patreon and to space out a bit more. That means audio and all of its nuances. And I believe it will be a wise decision for me. I will continue to appear on Spaces every Sunday at 8 p.m. So be sure to record those hours on your calendars. Join Twitter. We will discuss current events on the Joe Budden, Rory Mall, and Breakfast Club podcasts, as well as any significant news that is dominating the lives of those who listen to us. So the market and I will continue to provide emergency podcasts. I'll be on Spaces right away with the emergency episode if something goes wrong, like Joe Budden firing ICE. Okay, everyone, enjoy your day. Calm.